Good morning, everyone. Today our session is going to be on scenario-based learning. I see a couple familiar names, so welcome back. And if I have not met you or you haven't been to one of our sessions, my name is Deshira Jackson, and I'm a principal learning consultant here at Instructure. And so our session today is going to be over, what is scenario-based learning? How can it be utilized inside of Canvas using our built-in native tools? And we'll do a lot of kind of hands-on kind of talking back and forth, because I want to make sure that I have some examples that are, very specific, but I want to make sure that whatever subject or topic that you're thinking about using this in for your various kind of Canvas courses, that you're able to, either get an example or get a good idea of how you can utilize and try this out. If you have any questions as we go through the session, then feel free to use the chat. I will have some kind of question, and hands-on time where you have the option to unmute and ask your questions then as well. Okay. So the first thing we want to just talk about is just to get us a basic definition of scenario-based learning. Scenario-based learning is one of those things that is, falls under the category of kind of problem-based learning, and it allows you to create interactive scenarios to support more of an active learning environment in your course. And it could be, like I said, problem-based or a case-based learning. And so it's very popular, something that we're seeing that is developing and being utilized more, especially as we're, offering our classes more digitally. And so scenario-based learning will allow you to have your students not only kind of understand what the subject matter is or the content area of your course, it will also have them do action items to support active learning. And it's really important that our students not only know how to take a multiple choice quiz or test and be able to answer those questions effectively. We also want them to show. And so with scenario-based learning, you typically put your students in a situation where if they're using real world experience, and those situations are usually really contextual, providing them with opportunities to kind of develop their skills or information that they can, transfer into these real life situations. And really the goal of it is getting your learners the ability to engage and stimulating their brain activity. So they can really walk away with understanding how they can use this kind of, in real life. And I've seen it used in a variety of different courses. So there's multiple ways that you can utilize this, no matter what your subject level is. And it really also helps with a lot of other things that we talked about, like creating an engaging learning environment. It also hits on personalized learning in some parts. So it really helps kind of get your students more connected to your course and how it relates to how they can use it in real life. The most important thing is the why. And so it's really one of those things that works best when it's applied to tasks that require decision-making and critical thinking skills in complex situations. So as we're talking about creating these scenarios for your students, you'll have to do somewhat of I would say almost kind of like a backwards kind of design to implement these things, thinking about what are the objectives I want my students to learn, what are the questions that I want them to be able to answer, what are the skills that I want to be demonstrated. And so that's really the why. It's going to help improve their engagement. It's going to help them understand how to use this in the real life. And then really what's most important is that they're able to process and really dive deeper into, that information. Students can easily memorize things and easily, choose the correct answers when we have those typical kind of multiple choice, true false tests. This will make them actually think about it and come up with a solution. And what's great about it is a lot of times we all think differently. Our brains are all kind of wired a little bit differently of how we process things. This will allow students to all kind of showcase, the same skills and knowledge, but it will allow them a little flexibility on how they get to that overall solution in that particular scenario. So the first thing I wanted to do was just show us an example of what does this look like, or what could this look like inside of a Canvas course. So in this example I have here, this is an example for a social psychology course. So I'm going to go and click into this course really quickly and go to the assignment. So I'm using a Canvas assignment to give this to the students. And so to give you some background on this particular example, this is a social psychology course. Throughout the course, students have helped they've done multiple different scenarios where they've helped multiple departments and teams address specific challenges that are related to the concept of social psychology. And so this scenario here puts the students directly inside of a situation that might happen to them in real world and is asking them to apply the things that they've learned in this course about social psychology. So in this example, the students are placed as the role of the director, and the scenario is that the company's director of human resources has asked for their opinion concerning a department that seems to have taken a turn for the worse. And so so you've given them a background about exactly what their role is going to be. And then in the scenario, you're getting reached out to by the HR director, and they want your opinion to help, fix this department or help get this department up to par. So some background information are 6 months ago, the IT department was leading the company in terms of customer service and productivity. However, in the last 3 months, there's been a lot of issues. There have been tons of hardware and software problems that are not being addressed in a timely manner. There's a high rate of absences, and it's still rising. Productivity and innovation have decreased, and there's many personal and interpersonal issues that have been brought to the HR department for resolution. So overall, that's kind of, you've got your role, you've got the background and some information about what's going on. And so the HR director wants you to give them some opinion on letting go people, hiring new employees with the right attitude. And he's asking your opinion before he starts hiring and letting people go of how to kind of work with the situation that's happening at the moment. And so here I've laid out, and I just made this very simple. This is just a basic banner. I've let my students know the role. These little icons I've added in here, I pulled them from a site called Flat Icon, and I can link that into the resources. So I just broke it up and chunked it up a little bit. So they have their role, they know their scenario, and then down here is the actual assignment. So this is what I'm going to actually be creating. And so it's going to be a 2 to 3 page report. I want them to define the current problem, give potential causes for the problem, and ways that they might address solving the problem. And then also there's also going to be a peer review as well with this assignment. And also, as you see down here, and this is just a sample demo rubric, but I also included a rubric to make sure students know what I'm going to be grading on, what are the expectations, and what I'm going to be looking on. So in this particular scenario, we're really relying on the students' knowledge that they have acquired thus far in the course to really make some real recommendations on how they would handle the request that's coming from the HR director. And so it immerses them in that. It allows them to flex. And as you see on the assignment, I didn't give too many kind of rigid requirements. That would be more so in the rubric of things that we're looking for. But this allows students to think about this in a strategic way, use those critical thinking skills, and come up with a solution that they think is best for this particular problem. So this is an example. So I'm just going to pause really quick just to see if we have any questions or your initial thoughts about creating a scenario like this from your course.
Hi, Deshara. Good morning. I just have a question about the scenario. I guess it made me think of vignettes. Is it very similar? Like you're just kind of summarizing a problem and how you would respond. So you're just putting yourself in that position.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Very similar. Yeah. And of course, your scenarios can be, this is just one assignment. I have some more examples, but other ways you can do it is I've seen some instructors do it where, their course is kind of centered around a scenario overall, like their course students are part of a company, and maybe each assignment, for each module or unit, they have a different role, and then they decide how they're going to respond based off of what they've learned that particular unit. So it can be as small or as large as you want it to be. I think that students seem to really enjoy this, because then it connects the real world experience with what they're learning in the coursework.
Yeah, thank you. And it just reminded me of vignettes because in social work, that's something we would do often, like ethical dilemmas. And so you're having to kind of apply, what principles or things that you're learning at the time. So it was very similar, and that's kind of what came up for me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Any other thoughts or questions about this? Awesome. Okay. So let's dive deeper into some of the how, right? So that's an example, but let's back up and think about how you would get to this point to kind of implement that into your Canvas course. So the first thing you want to think about is what are the skills, concepts, or learning objectives you would like your student to demonstrate? And then what type of scenario will be used? Is it going to be a problem-based scenario where students have to investigate a problem, make a decision, then use logical reasoning and critical thinking? That would be that example that I just showed. Could be an issue-based one where students take a stand on an issue. Sometimes this might be humanitarian in nature and explore them to understand how use it to explore it to determine how the decision-making process applies to them. So for issue-based scenario, I did this in a course that I taught that was on sustainability and merchandising. And so the project was basically a semester-long kind of scenario thing where they're deciding where they see the future of sustainability going, what's going to be their role in it, and what their thoughts are, overall based off of what we learned in that particular coursework. I provided them with articles weekly. And so this was something I did each week where they had a blog post to take an issue and at the end, or take a stand based off of what they've been reading. And at the end, it was kind of more of a reflective piece of, based off of what they learned, what are their thoughts now about sustainability and merchandising and the future of that. Another one is a speculative scenario where students predict an outcome in an event or feature using their present knowledge and understanding and ideas that they've learned. And then the last thing to really think about, to tie this all together is making sure you create a rubric, because students are going to be really excited to get in and immerse themselves in these different types of scenarios. But in order for you to structure it in a way to make sure they're academically meeting those needs and that it's, something there for you to grade in a very consistent way, adding a rubric to assess your students. Obviously you can add in the normal things like, grammar and different things like that. But think about as you're making, determining the skills and concepts and learning objectives, how you want to incorporate those into your grading process. So that it's no matter how students approach answering that scenario, that they're all going to be graded, consistently in the same way. One thing you could use is kind of what's called a mind map. And mind map is where you write down the central theme and think of all the ideas or ways in which students could possibly answer that to kind of get that flow. Or if you come up with a scenario, you can, use branching or something like that to think about the different skills or competencies or learning objectives that students may possibly kind of hit with that. So first question is, and you can feel free to unmute or pop this into the chat, thinking about your course and your subject that you teach, what are some authentic, real world problems that would get your student excited? So what are some things that you think that you could create a scenario around? And I'll give us a couple minutes to think about that. And then, like I said, feel free to pop those into the chat, or you can unmute as well if you want to. All right, here we go. Wendy, nursing leadership scenarios regarding difficult situations, delegation, team building. Okay, sure. We're actually going to get to that right after this, Wendy. I'm going to show you all the different ways you could do it in Canvas. But that's really great. I'm going to show you built-in native Canvas tools and then also some free third-party ones, but do get those approved. But these are some ones that I think you'll like. And if you're, if you're thinking through this and you're like, I can't really wrap my head around how this could be used in my class. And stick around, we're going to go through some ways that you can use it in Canvas. And I'm happy to talk through some other examples. You know, if you're like, hey, this is my course, think about maybe some potential career paths that maybe your students could take that, you know, whatever and it doesn't have to be everything they're learning in your course. It could just be one specific, you know, unit that they really, really need to know. Like, how could that be used in the real world? So think of it that way. So I'll let you guys still think and then pop them in the chat if you have questions, and we can talk through some possible examples for scenarios. But let's talk about using scenario-based learning in Canvas and with the tools that are built in. Okay, so the first thing is going to be just your normal assignments. Assignments can be used in a variety of ways, right? So the assignment that I showed here has a couple different things to it, right? So I've given my assignment details, but further, I've given my students choice so they can decide how they're going to submit it. Do they want to use that text entry where they type the answer directly in there? They can do a file upload and upload a traditional paper. They could do a PowerPoint. I also have given them the option to do a media recording. So this would be them doing a video submission. So thinking about giving your students choices of how they're going to submit. And again, the rubric is really important to make sure it's, you know, the grading is consistent no matter what way they choose to submit the assignment. And I think it depends on, you know, how heavily weighted this assignment would be. If you're going to give them all those choices, maybe if it's an entry level assignment where you want to try this out, kind of low stakes, it could possibly be a video recording just to get an understanding if the students get it. And what's great in Canvas is that you can respond back to your students using the media recording inside of SpeedGrader as well. If this is going to be more of a project or something that's more comprehensive that comes at the end, maybe you want to stick to file upload and give them, you know, more specifics on how they can, what they need to do. Like I did here, I did 2 to 3 page report. What I could do if I said media recordings is it could be a 2 to 3 page report or a 10-minute video. So something like that. I've also incorporated peer review on this assignment as well. So if you haven't used the peer review option inside of Canvas, I'm gonna go in and click edit so you can see it. Whenever you're setting up assignments, and you can also do this on discussions as well, there's an option down here for peer reviews. And basically this is simple. The student turns in the paper, they're going to be assigned, another student has turned in their assignment to critique and give them feedback. They will have access to the rubric to use as well. So that can also be there as a guideline. The peer review could be a part of their grade. So it could be a part of this assignment overall, or I see some faculty make it a separate grade. So you have a grade for the assignment and the peer review is an additional, like, you know, 5 to 10 points, whatever it is. So when it comes to peer reviews in Canvas, you have 2 different options. You can either assign it manually where you'll go in and pair the students up, or you can allow Canvas to do it automatically. So in order for this to happen properly with automatically, students will not be paired with another student until both students have submitted. So really getting that you know, the goal of making sure everyone turns things in on time or early if possible. Otherwise, they will not be paired up with someone. And then it's not like as soon as you submit, you're automatically paired up with the student. It's going to be a little bit of a delay. I think it could be up to an hour, I believe is the delay before you get paired with someone to look at their work. And I've personally used peer review from the side of the student. And there are notifications that come up, but I don't know that it's as straightforward as we would probably want it to be as instructors. So if you're going to add in that peer review component, I definitely would put in some instructions or links to our student guides that have videos and step-by-step guides with images of how the peer review process works, so that doesn't become a barrier for your students. And then you can decide how many reviews they get. So it could be 2 or 1, how many, you know, people that you want them to look at for this particular assignment. What I see with the value of peer reviews is, especially in scenario-based learning, as students get to see the different ways that other of their peers would approach the same situation. And sometimes it's good to follow that up with maybe a discussion board or reflective piece of, okay, now that you've done the peer reviews, what are some things that you found interesting? What were eye-opening? So it also kind of helps build up that active learning process as well. It gets them diving deeper into, connecting your coursework with the real world and understanding that there's multiple ways that these things can be approached. Other tools that you can use inside of Canvas are group assignments. So if you're wanting to do this in a kind of a group project type of idea where everyone's going to work together, and maybe the scenario, there's one big scenario and the group all has different roles as a part of that scenario, group assignments are great to use. You would simply, inside of your assignments, you'll go into click this is a group assignment. So you will have to set up your groups ahead of time. Now you can do it when you click on it, that box will pop up, but I would say try to group your students up ahead of time so you're ready for that when you get to this process. What's great about group assignments in Canvas is that one person in the group will turn in the assignment, and that counts as a submission for everyone. And then you, whenever you're setting this up, by default, one person will turn it in, everyone will get the same grade and feedback. But if you would like to give students individual feedback and maybe different grades, then you'll choose this option right here. Still, one person will turn it in, but in SpeedGrader, you'll be able to give each of your students their own individual grade and feedback as needed. An additional thing that you can do is also attaching learning outcomes. So learning outcomes can be added to rubrics as non-graded pieces. So if you just want to add in a learning objective or standard or competency that your students are going to be demonstrating to the rubric, you can add that in as well. You would go into outcomes and create outcomes for all of your different learning objectives, and then you can attach them to a rubric. I believe we have a recording on the standards-based grading session that we did last week. So if you're interested in that, I would take a look at that recording. So pause. This is just one example in Canvas for assignments specifically. Any questions about any of these 4 things up on the screen, or any thoughts about using assignments or rubrics that I can clarify for you? And again, feel free to unmute if it's faster than typing for you. Next tool that you can use in Canvas is discussions, and you can use discussions in a couple different ways. You could just have one discussion board with the scenario and have your students do the traditional, respond back to how they would approach the scenario, and then maybe read to other peers and respond back to, those peer responses. That's one way. Another way is you can give multiple scenarios for your students to choose from. So if you did that, let me show you, and I think I have an example of that. Okay, so what you would do is create a discussion board and just let the students know, okay, these are the 3 scenarios, choose one. And then what you would do is in the discussion board, you would start the thread for students to respond to. So if they chose scenario A, they would come in and reply here. If they chose scenario B, reply here. Depends on how many options you had. And so that would give them choice, about different situations, still give them guidance about what their role is, background, problems, and all of that. You can absolutely put that all here in this discussions detail box. Or you could link it to a page if you want it to be more granular. So it could be scenario A has its own page with all of that information, and you can link it directly in the discussion detail box. Same with the additional ones that if you decide to do multiple. Discussions really are a great tool, right? They allow students to, reflect, share their interpretations of what the problem is and the solutions, as well as their decisions. So that's a great tool to use. And you also have the option to add in, peer review as well. Now, I'm just going to be transparent. I think I like peer review on assignments. But I think on discussions, I think the way that we typically do it, where they reply to 2 students, is easier for me to grade as an instructor, because you can go into SpeedGrader and you can see exactly what their responses were. And especially if you threw threaded replies, you can kind of see what they were responding to. I think peer reviews is a little not as intuitive on discussions as it is on assignments. So keep that in mind, making sure you go through it and make sure you're understanding all the kind of checkpoints that your students will need to do in order for that to work properly. You always have the ability in Canvas, whenever you're creating anything, to go in and student view, test it out as a test student to see what your students will be experiencing. And then also, if you respond as a test student, you can go into SpeedGrader and see what does the grading process look like, so you can get a full scope of understanding of how this works. You also can do groups. So groups is another way that you can break students up. Instead of doing this option here where we have multiple scenarios, you could do separate discussion boards by scenario and group up students who want to answer, those specific, or that wants to work with that specific scenario. Same thing, you will still need to create your groups ahead of time. And whenever you go in to create your discussions, you're going to want to do, if it needs to be graded, make sure you check the graded box. If not, if it's just going to be there for participation, you're not going to take a grade, then you don't have to check that. You'll have to check this as a group discussion and choose from the list of groups that you've used, that you've created for this. Okay. What's great about groups is whenever you create them, you have another of options to do it. So you can do self sign up, where students you can provide them a list ahead of time and they can sign up for what group they want to be in. And you also have the ability to turn that off, right? So give the students, let's say we open up the scenarios today, they have until Wednesday to choose the group that they want to be in, and then you'll turn it off, on Thursday, so they can't switch groups. So what you would do is go into people, and this is how you could create groups. If you haven't seen it, I'll just give you a high level overview. You'll create the group set. So the group set is essentially, why are we creating this group? So you could have multiple different groupings in your course. One could be for discussions, one could be for a group project, one could be for these various kind of scenario-based assignments that you wanted to do. And so you'll name it. And then the option down here is allow self-sign up. What will happen when you choose this is students will get in their navigation, they'll have groups, and then they can go in and sign up for the groups. Or you have the ability, if you decide to just randomly assign it, you have two different options of either splitting them in a specific number of groups. So if you want 4 groups, you don't matter how many students are in each, you'll click that. Or you can do, say, I want 3 students in each group, and then it'll automatically distribute that. So whichever one you choose, you'll let Canvas know, and you can always drag and drop or change groups as you need to. So I'm going to pause just to see if there are any questions about utilizing or creating scenario types of assignments or activities and discussions, or any further questions about the groups tool and maybe how that works. Awesome. Another option that we have that is a tool that's built into Canvas is called, oh, perfect, Wendy. Another one that we have is called Mastery Pass. Now, this is more of an advanced tool that is available on Canvas. So I would say before you tackle Mastery Pass, you want to make sure that you have a good understanding and you're comfortable with creating modules, pages, assignments, and quizzes before you start to looking at Mastery Pass, because it does take quite a few steps to set it up, but it's a really great tool to offer student choice. You also can use it if you want to use it for more like remediation or intervention for your students as well. So high level overview of how Mastery Paths work is all students start in the same place. So all students are going to start usually with a quiz. And the quiz can be done in 1 or 2 ways. So it could be a quiz where you're testing for competency or understanding. Based off of that score, they'll go down 1 of 3 paths to work on, a grouping of assignments, discussions, or look at content. So an example would be, I see this used a lot in math. So at the beginning of the semester, all the students will take this quiz. So the instructor can see exactly where they are in terms of having the foundational knowledge to be successful in that course. Based off of the score they receive, they'll be sent down one of three paths. So maybe students who score, like less than 50% or so, you may want to give them more activities to work on, to practice, more quizzes, discussions, assignments, whatever it is. And then maybe students who scored in the top 10%, they can just go ahead and go and work on whatever the assignment is for that particular module or unit. You also can use mastery paths for choice. So everyone will still start at a quiz. And the reason why we start at a quiz is because it's self-graded. Now, you can absolutely do an assignment or discussion if you want to see what your students' responses are and control what path they go down. But a quiz is usually kind of the easiest. So they'll start at a quiz. Usually it's just like a one-question quiz. So this example here is a choice for them to pick a book. And based off the book that they pick, there are assignments and pages with lesson content and discussion boards for students to work on. So it's just a one question quiz, and it just tells the student, this is what you're getting into. These are going to be your choices. Once the student takes that quiz, then they will go in, choose their book based off of the book that they choose. They'll get a grouping of items to work through. What's great about Mastery Paths is whether you use it for choice or for that other way where it's more of understanding and grouping students on the level that they're on, Canvas will automatically manage your gradebook for you. So if you have multiple assignments and quizzes and things, students will only get assigned the things that are on their particular path. You don't have to go in and excuse them from assignments or things that they were not, that was not on their path. So it's a really great tool to use. Students have no idea that there's different paths depending on how you set it up. So I think it's something I really enjoy. And again, it could work really well if you wanted to have multiple scenarios. So maybe the one question quiz would tell them, okay, these are the three scenarios. And then next they would choose one of those three based off of the one they chose. Maybe you have the page with content that has more context about what the background of that scenario is and that problem. And then they have a specific assignment to go with that. And so there's a number of ways that you can do that, but of course, this is definitely more of an advanced kind of level thing. If you want more information about it, I'm happy to provide some additional resources as well. Any questions or thoughts about mastery paths, or have you heard of them? If you have it, there's some really great resources inside of our Canvas community for you to look at them. Okay, Jennifer, you've heard of them. Okay, perfect. Great. Another tool that you can use in Canvas is Pages. And so Pages can be used in a couple different ways. So Pages can be used to give more context about a particular scenario. If you're going to give your students examples, maybe link to a page that has more details on that specific scenario they've chosen. Pages can also be used as a collaborative piece. So whenever you create pages, by default, let me open one up so I can show you really quick. So I'm just going to click Edit. So down here, you may or may not have noticed this, there's the options. So first it says who is allowed to edit this page, and it's defaulted to only teachers. You have the ability to change it to teacher and students, and this is going to be something you do on a per page basis. So each page that you want this option to be on, and this would allow your students to be able to come in and edit and add information to this page. So if you wanted to, you could create a scenario and have your students come in and edit and put in their thoughts about whatever the scenario is or how they would approach it. So it can be used as more of a collaborative tool. It can be used as a wiki. So maybe you put up a scenario and maybe your students can put in different links to resources or, videos, articles, or anything that would support helping figure out how to navigate through this particular scenario. And then also we have a release coming out, I believe it's Wednesday, where you're going to also see an additional option here that says publish this page on a certain date. So you can also put in a date of when this page will basically unlock and be available for your students to read, or if you do options, be able to contribute to collaboratively. Another option is what's called branching. So this is a great tool if you want to kind of have your students go down different paths. And this would be more of a practice thing. So maybe you have a scenario, right? So these are my 3 scenarios and students can choose. Okay. Once they choose red, maybe I have a questions about, okay, now that you've chosen this scenario, here's a problem that has presented itself. What are you going to do? Right? So one of the options may be, go left or go right. They'll choose it and it'll go into, you can keep making this go into as many pages as you want to. So in this one, they chose a scenario, then they chose an action, and then this is the final. If it's, correct or incorrect, you can provide them feedback or details about why that answer choice was correct or incorrect. So this is a great interactive activity to use. If you're interested in getting an example of this, if you go into Commons, you would type in branching, and you can pull in this example into your course, and then you can go in and edit it as needed. But all this is a series of pages that have been linked together. That's it. And also videos, we talked about videos a lot. Students can, you can create a video where you are describing what the scenario is as opposed to text, or you can do both. And you can put that in your assignment details, your discussion details, just to give students different ways of either they can listen and review the scenario through the video, or if they want to use text, it'll give them choice of how they want to take in that information. Again, we talked about student submissions through video, which you can do on assignments, and you can also do that on discussions. And then if you have any third-party tools for video, then you can also incorporate those as well. So if you have, if you want to record it on YouTube and embed a link to it, you can do that there, or there's a number of different ones that are available for you or your students to utilize. We also have assessments. So if you haven't heard, we are no longer, at the moment, we don't have a depreciation or basically an end of life for classic quizzes. So you will have the option of using both classic quizzes or new quizzes from now until, a decision has changed. But what I like about classic quizzes is that you have the ability to do a practice quiz. So this is something that's not going to negatively impact the student's grade. They will get feedback, they'll get points so they can understand basically if it was correct or incorrect. Or it could just be a normal quiz that's more of kind of like a low stakes for them to get a basic understanding. You can do practice quizzes with new quizzes. Whenever you create the quiz, just click do not count this towards the final grade. That way it won't negatively impact the students' overall grading your course. Whenever you're creating your quizzes, there is a tool in both new quizzes and classic quizzes that allows you to provide feedback based off of the answer choice that students have selected. So if you see the little comment box on classic quizzes, there's also one on new quizzes. That's where you can provide feedback and you can say, this is correct. And you can say why it's correct. And then if they chose any of the incorrect answer choices, you can give them more specific details on why that was incorrect and maybe provide them with some resources to take a look at so they can further dive deeper into why this wasn't correct and why the other answers were. So in this example here, this is just taking a normal quiz and changing it into a scenario. So the question here is just, what is the best strategy for encouraging long-term behavior change in your employees? And you'll see here we have 3 choices. And I think this is one of those questions that I would say is pretty easy for students to answer, or they could use process of elimination to figure out what is the proper answer choice. Now I'm going to show you an example of taking that same question and incorporating a scenario. And so instead of just asking what's the best way to approach this, now we have Andrew's a sales manager who's been struggling to motivate his team to better performance. He sent them to a conference where they learned a lot about sharing stories about previous happy customers to improve sales. A few salespeople really like this technique, but he wants everyone to start using it more. In the long term, he wants to change their attitude about the technique. What should Andrew do to encourage his team? Now, this is very similar to the question before. It still has the same thing about how do you encourage your team? What are some ways you can do this? But instead, it's put the student in the situation where they're in a scenario, and either they could identify themselves as Andrew or just see, outside of it that, okay, that Andrew needs to make a decision. How should he make this decision? And so the answer choices are similar, but they're more specific. So threatening to put anyone not using storytelling on a performance improvement plan, offering verbal recognition for using storytelling, or offering a paid trip to Hawaii for using storytelling. So if we go back to the original question, they were very same, threatening punishment, offering a small or large reward. But in our scenario, it's much more specific, right? We have much more specific action items. So that's another way that you can incorporate scenario-based learning as well. Taking a look at your particular assessments, going through and figuring out, okay, how can I maybe change some of these questions to be more of a scenario thing? And that might be a good place to start, if you want to kind of start rolling this out just a little bit to see how your students respond and how they're engaging with it. If they're getting it, it may be just taking a look at maybe some of your assignments and questions and seeing if you can incorporate that. So I'm going to pause just to see, are there any thoughts or questions about any of the kind of options of using it in Canvas? And then while you're thinking about that, go back to that previous question of, what are some real world, examples that your students could, see themselves in, right? Like what are some problems that would get your students excited? Okay. And so Wendy, I know you said you had some examples with nursing leadership and, and thinking about difficult scenarios. Is there any of the particular tools in Canvas that you think you might start with for some of those leadership scenarios?
I like the concept of being able to take them down a path and they choose, if they make an incorrect choice, they see the manifestation of that. I like that concept a lot. It would definitely take a lot to build that. So I'm trying to process, you don't want to do that on every scenario. So maybe do one as a trial run just to see how it goes the first couple of semesters, get feedback from the students, and then reincorporate them. But I could see that, especially towards the end of a class where you're talking about delegation and things like that, sending them down a real life case scenario of what happened to a nurse when she did this, or what happened when this happened, that sort of thing. So I can see it being a potential. It's just making sure that you develop the correct pathways with each step. And I think that that's the difficult part, because I don't know about everybody else on the Zoom, but it's really easy to put down the right answer. It's really hard to come up with a creative wrong answer that sounds plausible all the time. So, but I'm excited about the concept. I'm excited about the ability to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're right, because sometimes it's very clear, even with multiple choice answers, that, okay, this is not the correct answer. So, definitely with scenario-based learning, it will take some work to do. That's why it might be good to start off with, like you said, the branching ones, or maybe starting out with an assignment where there isn't necessarily a correct or, right or wrong answer per se for your students to be presented with, but they will be able to process how they would handle it or approach it.
Right. And then be able to self-correct. Even if they take one deviation that's wrong, are they able to then self-correct to get back on the right path? So I think that it's just something to play with.
Yep. And that peer review component might be something that would be helpful as well, because sometimes when they see how other people approach it, then their wheels get turning and they're thinking, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
Exactly.
And I think that those types of peer reviews to me have better, I would say more, and I guess engagement from the students once they see how other people have approached it, as opposed to great job. I agree, you know. The basics
Exactly.
that we hear all the
Yeah.
time. Anyone else? Perfect. So I know I've thrown a lot at you, and you probably have a lot going on in your mind and you're thinking about it. I would say with anything that you try new in Canvas, whether it's trying a new tool or, you know, trying to approach something like this, do it very, you know, small at a time. So if I were approaching this in a course, I might use a discussion board first to prevent a scenario, just to see or present a scenario just to see how my students engage with that. You also, to Wendy's point, can get feedback from your students. So inside of Canvas, if you wanted to use a classic quiz, you can do an ungraded survey to get feedback from your students. And you can also allow these submissions to be anonymous. So you can get that, you know, really specific feedback. And I would just ask some questions about that particular scenario and get you know, details about, okay, what did you like about it? What is some information that was missing that you wondered, you know, asking them about the rubric, and that will help you kind of develop this throughout your, you know, some different semesters. So those are some different ways to use it. You also can, if you want to, just go in with one of your assessments and create maybe a practice quiz. Take some of those questions and turn them into scenarios and create a practice quiz. And you can see how students are doing with those as well. So those are another different ways that you can approach it and start to use it inside of Canvas. But if you don't have any questions, and I'll stick around for a couple more minutes, that is our session for today. And I hope that you all walked away learning at least one thing, and that you'll try this out. I know it's later in the semester now, so you're probably not going to try it out right now, but you can absolutely go ahead and try that out, you know, maybe for the spring. You're very welcome.
I do have an off the beat question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just because there's been a little bit of confusion with among my colleagues. Is Beach Board gone as of spring semester? So Canvas is spring semester.
Adam or Sabrina, do you have an answer to that? I'm not 100% sure.
I saw Adam unmuted, but I don't hear anything. But so we will have both for spring. It's summer that we will just be on Canvas.
Okay. And then I know that ATS has been offering several courses and things like that. Is there a way to, where can I find them to watch any classes on even just building your course?
Yeah, you can find our recordings on our events and workshops page. So let me grab that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.